6 News presentation of Veterans Voices is sponsored by these patriotic businesses. Veterans Voices.
Hello and welcome to our annual special celebrating Veterans Voices. For the next half hour, we're going to take a look at how the nation has honored those who gave the last measure of their devotion and how we're helping and paying tribute to those who served and are still with us. We're starting, as always, by focusing on those who gave their lives for this country. Locally, a book is now shining a spotlight on the 1st Michigan Colored Infantry and the mark it left on our nation. Sean Graney spoke with the author about the importance of preserving their legacy and why honoring these men still matters today.
At just 23 years old, Maurice Imhoff is helping shine a new light on Michigan's past, bringing forgotten heroes back into the focus. He says he's making sure the state's first black regiment isn't left in the margins of history.
Get that one!
These Civil War soldiers were more than uniforms and battles. They were fathers, sons, and free men who demanded to be seen.
We are never told the story of the over 180,000 black men who took up arms to go fight for the freedom of others. We don't get told that story. Stories of them capturing flags on the battlefield, fighting for their other brothers in arms, protecting each other.
As both a historian and author, Imhoff sees this history as more than just the past. He says it's a lesson today's generation can still learn from.
Talking a lot of 18 through 25-year-olds were part of the regiment. It wasn't a bunch of older men. These were younger guys who had just got their first taste at freedom. 1,000 of the 1,400 men were former slaves.
Imhoff says some of the men's journeys to freedom started long before the war, escaping slavery through the Underground Railroad.
A lot of men took the Underground Railroad to come to Michigan. There were men who made it all the way to Canada, but then heard about this regiment being formed and came back to the United States.
And that connection to history runs deep here in Jackson, where the regiment's story first took shape and where its legacy still marches on.
To have, about 10 years later, a regiment, a full regiment of black soldiers in uniform marching through those same streets was remarkable for this community. And I think it still stands the test of time.
Imhoff says the book is available online on Amazon as well as at Targets around Lansing and Jackson. Here for you in Jackson, Sean Graney, 6 News.
Well, there are fewer and fewer World War II veterans still living in America. People who were 20 years old when the war ended in 1945 are 100 years old now, and that makes the events that honor them even more special. That includes this event, which took place in Livingston County almost a year ago now. It celebrated Gabriel Michel, who was born in Mexico more than a century ago, before his family moved to Texas during the Mexican Revolution. Gabriel was one of 12 siblings. He joined the U.S. Navy and served in the Pacific Theater from 1943 to 1945, and he was honored by the Livingston County Veterans Council.
World War II veterans are very few and far between, and when we were contacted about this gentleman, especially with his life story coming from Mexico and building a life here in the United States, and then his World War II service was actually in the Aleutian Islands, which is pretty rare. So we felt that he definitely should be honored.
After the war, Gabriel got his degree in electrical engineering, built a successful company, and with his wife Peggy raised 15 children. Truly a remarkable life worth celebrating. And then there are tributes to those World War II vets who did not make it home, at least not until this last year. That includes the body of a vet who went missing some 80 years ago. Navy Reserve Ensign Eugene Mandeberg got into a dogfight with Japanese planes in the summer of 1945. 4 of the 6 American planes on that mission never made it back, and Mandeberg's remains were not recovered for another year. But because the remains were so small and the technology was so limited, they were considered unknown and buried overseas. Those remains were recovered in 2019, and DNA testing was able to ID him earlier this year. Mandeberg, who was from Detroit, was buried in Livonia back in September. And Mandeberg wasn't alone. A World War II soldier who died in 1942 was finally laid to rest back in May with a proper burial. Army Air Force Sergeant James Schwartz was a Weberville native and was known by his loved ones as Jim. Army officials say he was captured by Japanese forces in the Philippine Islands, who subjected him to a 65-mile death march and then put him in an internment camp. The Army says he died a prisoner of war at the age of 21. His family and the whole community came out to pay tribute and to say goodbye.
It's a waste, you know, that he never got to live his life. I mean, our family would have been different. We would have had a whole nother branch. So it's bittersweet. I'm happy he's here, but I'm sad for what happened.
Sergeant Schwartz's funeral at the Summit Cemetery in Williamstown Township included full military honors. He was laid to rest next to his parents. Well, it's not just World War II. The Defense Department also identified the body of a Michigander who died in the Korean conflict. Army Private William Wheeler was just 18 when he was killed in October of 1950. He was reported missing in action after getting into a firefight near Yongsan, South Korea. 3 years later, Chinese forces returned some remains, but they could not be identified. So they were listed as unknown and buried in the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Honolulu. Some fragments were sent to a lab in 2017, and they were identified as Wheeler's in 2024. His remains are now buried in Troy. Our soldiers and sailors aren't just being honored with military funerals. Lawmakers are finding other ways to make sure their sacrifice will never be forgotten. And that includes the Dwayne Dewey Veterans Affairs Clinic up in Cadillac. The outpatient facility was renamed to honor the Congressional Medal of Honor recipient earlier this year. In April of 1952, Dewey was injured when a grenade went off near him, and as he was being treated for his wounds, a second grenade landed near him again. Without hesitation, the Marine corporal used his body to smother the explosion and save his squad. And believe it or not, he survived. President Eisenhower, who gave Dewey his medal, said he had a body of steel. Now, if you drive an hour and 20 minutes south of Cadillac and stop just short of Grand Rapids, you'll find yourself at the Captain Miguel Justin Nava Post Office. During his last weeks in office, President Joe Biden signed a new bill renaming the Comstock Park building after its hometown hero. Nava was one of 5 U.S. Marines killed in a helicopter crash outside of San Diego in February of 2024, leaving behind a wife and son. He grew up in Comstock Park, where his mother was a longtime employee of Comstock Public Schools and where he graduated from high school in 2013. And there's another attempt to recognize a World War II hero that's still in the works. It's a bill to rename a stretch of US 127 after 2nd Lieutenant Roosevelt Steiger. The Tuskegee Airman and Purple Heart recipient is from the Jackson area. His plane went down over the Adriatic Sea in October of 1944. His body was never recovered. But students at Jackson College uncovered his story, which led to the proposal to rename the road. The bill has already passed the Michigan House and is still waiting for a hearing in front of a Senate committee. Well, still ahead, we're going to take you to a couple of events that help serve those who served. How a nation is showing its appreciation. That's when Veterans Voices returns. To serve those who have served our country. Some of them help get those who are suffering back on their feet, and others make veterans aware of the services they might not know that they're entitled to. One of those events, which took place in mid-Michigan last month, goes by a name that says it all: Hero Fest. The Lansing Area Veterans Coalition event featured resources for those who served our country. The Battle Creek VA was there to help veterans sign up for their benefits and help them find jobs. Veterans could also get free haircuts. Organizer Annetta Smith says although she isn't a veteran, she does this work to honor her husband who fought in the Vietnam War.
Some of them don't realize that they still have benefits. We've actually had 2 or 3 veterans that have walked through and they've worked their whole life. They didn't realize they had veteran benefits that were available to them. So we are connecting them to the VA. I used to tell people with their blood, their sweat, and their tears and their time, they've paid for these benefits and they deserve them.
The VFW National Home in Eaton Rapids also hosted a veterans workshop. Of course, there were resources available, but this one also had a twist, a screening of a documentary about the lives of soldiers during the war in Iraq. Taryn Simmons spoke with the director of the film, and she has more on the message he hopes to get across.
once I got there, I fell in love with the men and women that serve, and was sort of blown away by the depth of their spirituality, the depth of their perspective, the things that they're wrestling with.
Documentary filmmaker Jay Rademacher traveled to Iraq during the war to embed himself in the day-to-day lives of what servicemen and women went through. At least a dozen of veterans and their families came out to watch the film, which was released in February. Ahead of the screening, Rademacher talked about the purpose of the film, which he says is to open up a dialogue about the trauma and the struggles veterans face while transitioning back into society.
And when we introduce the film, we're going to encourage the veterans to also be emotionally courageous and also open up about their experiences, as a group.
Eric Calley, Senior Vice President for the VFW National, says this seminar unlocks a chance for relatives to also understand the hardships of what a soldier's experience is after returning home.
This is a little insight for veterans' families to understand what the veteran has went through, to not only better help their families understand, some of their battles that they fight every day, but to be able to have tools to use to be able to help them in the future.
The film tackles hard topics such as suicide and even an emotional perspective from the relatives of those who served. Rademacher says the film was inspired by his brothers and what they've been through.
Looking back on it, I did it for love of my brothers. I wanted to reconnect with them. They were distant to me after going to war and coming back.
The film was sponsored by the Gary Sinise Foundation, which supports veterans and first responders. Gary Sinise is famous for his role as Lieutenant Dan in the movie Forrest Gump. Brothers After War is currently on Amazon Prime. Well, still ahead, we are going to talk about one of the leading causes of death for veterans and show you how the community is coming together to do something about it. Stay tuned. Veterans Voices will be right back. Far too many of them that struggle ends in suicide. Just a few years ago, the VA reported that more than 6,000 vets ended their lives in the span of a year. That adds up to more than 17 per day. 170 of those happened in Michigan, which is almost one every other day, and which is almost twice the rate of suicides generally. But a new study published by doctors here in Michigan suggests that vets who get certain types of therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder can lower the risk of suicide by almost 25%. The study at the VA in Ann Arbor shows people who undergo cognitive processing therapy or prolonged exposure therapy have a lower suicide risk than other forms of therapy, and that it starts to work within the first few sessions. The study suggests making it more available to veterans across the nation. The battle to save veterans' lives is a constant one, and the fight came to the greater Lansing area this past week at an event to help veterans improve their mental health. Karina Prieto joined advocates to learn more about how they're trying to save lives.
A room filled with stars, stripes, and stories.
I was in the United States Air Force for 4 years and proudly served.
Stories of honorable service.
I lost my husband 4 years ago.
And also great sacrifice.
Some people are able to walk away from an experience and not have it affect them in the long run. And others hold it in. They don't want to talk about it.
Chair of the Lansing Area Veterans Coalition, Inetta Smith, knows firsthand from her husband who served in Vietnam.
For everybody to be able to talk to each other and share experiences and learn more, that's the best thing for our veterans. We're going to be able to take care of our veterans, help our veterans, and help them help themselves.
And Smith wants to remind people to check on veteran families.
It's not just that soldier, it's not just that veteran. It trickles down to everybody in the household.
Lonnie Hill's husband served in the Marines and Army National Guard.
When my husband passed away, he had 12 medications and was given an additional one.
Hill says her husband suffered from PTSD and ended up taking his own life in 2022.
PTSD therapy helps better than any of the drugs. Drugs, I feel, are a Band-Aid.
The event focused on the relationship between medication and veteran suicide.
There's hundreds of different drugs that can cause akathisia, and akathisia can cause violent self-harm and suicide.
All speakers echoed that medicine can help people, but should be monitored more carefully.
I'm not against prescription drugs. I'm against people not knowing what they're taking and why they're taking it.
A veteran speaker here today says that the VA's 2024 National Veteran Suicide Prevention Report shows the real importance of continuing to offer support and resources for those who have served. Here for you in Lansing, Karina Prieto, 6 News.
If you or someone you know is considering suicide, help is just a phone call away. Call 988, then press 1. You can also text the number on your screen to get help that's targeted for veterans. When we come back, we're going to mark some anniversaries. Including a birthday tribute to a branch of our nation's armed forces. Stay tuned, Veterans Voices. We'll be right back. Vietnam War. And this Veterans Day, we shine a light on its complex history and its connection to mid-Michigan. Megan Vasili is here for you with a closer look at a new exhibit at Michigan State University.
Vietnam, the war was a really important moment in American history.
A war that shaped a generation and one that sparked passion, protest, and painful division.
It was, really the first example of a major war in which the United States really wasn't able to achieve its objectives.
It's a history that still resonates today.
In the 1950s, the university received a series of federal contracts to basically try to help build a stable non-communist government in the country of South Vietnam.
At the time, it seemed like a public service, but as the war escalated, that relationship became a source of controversy.
The fact that the kind of unrest and instability in South Vietnam erupted in the mid-1960s into this full-scale conflict that the United States decided to radically escalate through a large-scale military intervention.
Students marched, professors debated, and Michigan State's role in Vietnam became part of a much larger question.
What's the role of a university in American society? It's always been a question, in the history of the United States.
MSU's connection to the war inspired an exhibit in the MSU Library's main gallery called A Campus and a War, Michigan State University and Vietnam.
Many members of our families have items that are associated with the Vietnam War, whether they are recordings or letters or materials that were generated by soldiers, by members of our family who were experiencing those the war in and of itself.
All pieces of a history that still hits close to home. That connection especially clear this Veterans Day as we honor the men and women who served in Vietnam.
Our soldiers who fought in Vietnam, who saw monsoons, who sweated it out, gutted it out, lugged their gear, were never celebrated. So it's important to acknowledge them.
50 years later, the war's lessons still matter.
I hope that in helping students approach the war in this way, in a sort of maybe more nuanced way, that maybe that will have some application to the way that they think about very polarizing topics or issues in American society today, be they related to foreign affairs or domestic.
From the classroom to the archives to the men and women who lived it, the Vietnam War remains a story of conflict, sacrifice, and connection.
Not only is this a community story, but this is a campus story. This is something that, as we move into the next generation, it is important that we tell and share about the past and the present so we have a better understanding of what this is in the future.
Megan Vasili, 6 News.
2025 was also a milestone for the U.S. Army and Navy. Both turned 250 years old this year. The Army back in June, the Navy in October, and the United States Marine Corps also turns 250 this week. And Marines from across Michigan gathered for a Capitol celebration. The event was organized by State Representative Jason Woolford. The Howell man is himself a former Marine, as are his wife and daughter. When we come back from Michigan to Washington, we'll talk about what the state and federal governments are doing to help get veterans everything they deserve. Veterans Voices. We'll be right back. Army, Navy, and Marines all turned 250 this year, but here in Michigan, state officials are celebrating a different milestone, $100 million. That's how much the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency says it has recovered in benefits for vets and their families over the last decade. And that's with the help of the agency's Veteran Service Officer Program. The VSOs, who are accredited, make sure vets are getting the help that they need and every benefit they're entitled to. Veterans can take advantage of the Service Officer Program for toll-free by calling 1-800-MISH-VET or by following the link on your screen. We also have that phone number and link in the Scene on 6 section of our website, WLNS.com. Well, we want to thank you for joining us for Veterans Voices, and we want to thank those who have served and those who are serving for all they've done for our country. Good night.